Hey everyone, I hope you all are doing well. My AC is not working in my house, so I hope that you will all send me thoughts and prayers for the AC coming back on and somebody coming to service it quick. And I hope that you all are in cool environments during this very hot time. It's just been so hot recently. So, yeah, today in our discussions this week, we're going to get into some conversation around the language of digital culture. So, we've been talking in this class about how, different forms of rhetoric and communication expression offers a portal to social change. So, essentially exploring the bridges that are created between different forms of linguistic expression and social change, and how these different forms of expression and forms of expression in terms of how they get valued are connected to different modes of systemic power. So today we're thinking about how expression structures our digital experiences, and thinking specifically about how we could understand the protocol that we need to navigate in order to make sense of digital spaces and interact with one another in digital spaces as being its own different forms of linguistic expression, its different forms of rhetoric, and thinking about how that structures how we navigate digital spaces. So we're thinking about this in a way that we're considering how different norms and patterns that structure our behavior in digital spaces, they emerge through different forms of personal connection, as well as different forms of sociality. So we're thinking about how the ways that we navigate digital spaces, it's simultaneously both very personal as well as deeply social. So, in other words, thinking about the choices that we make as we navigate digital spaces. When we open up TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. We are making a series of choices that are deeply personal to, think about like who we follow, what we choose to like, what we post, and things like that. But at the same time, those individual choices are deeply interconnected with different social structures. And this is connected to, what content gets seen. So thinking about, I'm sure folks are familiar with, different shadow banning practices. So thinking about how systemic power is intertwined with, who tends to get shadow banned more frequently, or whose content, tends to get deleted more frequently, and thinking about how different forms of social inequity are intertwined with that. So thinking about that and how that influences how we navigate digital spaces and the choices that we make, as well as thinking about the protocol that we are asked to, or we navigate sort of unwittingly at times in digital spaces, that's structured by software engineers, is structured by folks that run social media companies, and a lot of those choices and decisions are out of our hands, but they influence how we are exploring digital space. So I think about this in the sense of how algorithms determine what we see, how algorithms will structure how long we stay on different social media sites and whatnot, how we find ourselves, doom scrolling at different times. That's all a part of the logic of social media platforms and whatnot. So we're thinking this week specifically about, this particular topic through a new media theorist named Wendy Chun, her concept of digital media habits. So she makes this key point in her work that posits that media tends to matter most when it doesn't matter at all. So thinking about unpacking that idea a little bit and considering how when media is so deeply entrenched in our everyday life, we just tend to not think about it. And it matters most in the sense that it becomes, so interconnected with the fabric of our social experience, with the fabric of, how we experience our individuality and, how we, perceive ourselves and perceive others, that it creates, a really interesting set of dynamics. Thinking about how, another media theorist named Henry Jenkins has also pointed out that, media has essentially become the water that we're swimming in. So thinking about, the sense of like a fish doesn't think about the ocean that it's swimming in. We have essentially become part of this social media environment where it's become like, we have become the fish in this large body of water. We don't think about, the social media structure that, we're navigating because it's become so naturalized to us. So, I want to talk a little bit about some of the contradictions that Wendy Chun discusses that emerge through digital culture. So she talks about how digital culture gives rise to this series of contradictory relationships, and she talks about, this relationship between hype and reality, surveillance and entertainment, and some other contradictory relationships. But we can talk about those two sets of relationships just to get us familiar with Wendy Chun's thesis. So, in thinking about this relationship between hype and reality, my mind always goes to the Fyre Fest fiasco that happened a couple of years ago, which feels like a lifetime ago, now in our COVID times. But thinking about, I'm sure folks may have seen the documentaries that came out around Fyre Fest, or, something about those documentaries and the media surrounding it. But thinking about, Fyre Fest represented this contradictory relationship between hype and reality, and that, there was this social media marketing campaign that emerged to promote the fest and created this illusion that, the Fyre Fest was going to be this incredible, luxury experience, where people would be able to party with influencers, and that, it was going to be the event of the decade, and whatnot. And then, considering what actually came to fruition and what happened, it demonstrated how the reality did not live up to the hype, and, demonstrated that contradiction. So thinking about how digital culture made that contradictory relationship possible, in the sense that, people would not have been under the impression that this would be an amazing experience of a lifetime that turned into, people getting soggy sandwiches under tents. But instead, thinking about that, they thought that it was going to be this other thing that happened. But digital culture definitely, was instructive for audiences in that way, and created a lot of confusion about the boundaries between hype and reality. Surveillance and entertainment is another contradictory relationship that Wendy Chun discusses. So, thinking about the relationship between surveillance and entertainment gets muddied in the sense that, we could think about, when, during last summer, when there was, an increase in protest and whatnot, there were a lot of folks that, were recording different protests that were happening, and, wanting to be in the moment and record the moment, and, filmed people that were engaging in different forms of activism, capturing people's faces and whatnot. And then, in, the months that, followed that, and continuing to this day, law enforcement is using different social media material to, um, uh, to basically gain information about protesters and whatnot. So thinking about this representing that contradictory relationship between surveillance and entertainment, because something, this device that, folks can perceive as, this is like my portal to connection. This is, my portal to, having, some sense of, networked communication, interesting relationships and whatnot. that gets contradicted by the ways that it can be engaged for surveillance purposes. So yeah, interesting, different forms of contradictory relationships, and we're thinking about, like, continuing to think this week about the relationship that language does share, and different forms of expression do share to social change, and working towards inspiring action and whatnot. So yeah, with that, we will talk more on the discussion board, and I hope that you all have a wonderful week.